Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's session, we're going to be drawing a simple Zentangle composition on our tile that uses a single tangle or pattern. Whenever we do a tile or a drawing like this using just one tangle, it's often referred to as a monotangle drawing. And that's because of the obvious fact that it has just a single tangle. But in order to create some variety in our drawing, we'll draw various iterations of this tangle in slightly different ways, with different inkings and different shadings, which will create some visually interesting patterns, hopefully. But let me first introduce you to the basic tangle, and then we'll get started right on the tile. So just to introduce you to this tangle, it's called FUGU, and it's by, or at least the original step out was by Sonya, Yencer. And so we're going to look at this. Now, the basic tangle itself is simply an oval and then a line through it and then an aura drawn around it. For some reason, that original simplified pattern like that reminds me of a coffee bean. But we can draw it in other variations too, where we create sort of a seed shape and then we add another line. Almost makes it look like a sideways cup or some kind of a nut or an acorn perhaps. And then again we add that aura to the outside. So it can be drawn in a variety of simple ways, and then the way that we shade and ink that shape is going to allow us to create some variety in our tile. So again, it's a simple oval or seed, or even like a football if you want to think of it like that, and we just create that, and then we create an aura around it. So it can have more pointed corners like this, or it can have more rounded shape like that, an oval, or it can be kind of a football or a cup shape. But we'll just create that pattern over and over in different ways on our tile to create the drawing that we're going to do today. All right, so let's grab our tile. So I'm using a standard Zentangle 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch tile, and the only preparation I'm going to do here is to create a little X or a cross in this to identify the center of the tile for me. Just helps with how we're going to create the pattern itself on this tile. So we're just sort of drawing these quadrants here. Doesn't have to be perfectly centered or anything like that, but just to give us a guideline. Now once we have that, we begin our drawing. So I'm going to create 4 of these FUGU shapes right here, with one side of the tip in the center, or near to the center. And you can see I'm drawing it not quite as big as the cap or as long as the cap. It's about like my thumbnail there. So just try to get a sizing for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw that extra shape on opposite sides here. So it's on the right here and it's on the left there. There's no rhyme or reason to that other than I'm trying to make it not look like we're just doing the same exact thing over and over. Then I'm going to rotate this tile and I'm going to put one right here. And let's do this one a little bit differently. Again, just for some interest or variety. So we've created 4 of these little FUGU shapes, somewhat in the center of this tile. Now let's create some additional ones in these areas here. And what we'll do, once we've created a bunch of these, I'll show you how we can differentiate them from one another by how we create inking patterns on each one. So you can see this one I made more of like a little bowl or a cup. So, but I'll do something similar down here. It's okay if you end up drawing behind another shape, as I did just a little bit there. I'll zoom in just a tiny bit here for you so you can see. So sometimes a line that we create goes behind another line, and we just call that drawing behind. And let's create a couple shapes here. These I'm going to do more like an oval. I'll draw the line through. And we're not looking for geometric ultra precision here. We're just drawing this shape, repeating it in various places on our tile. But as you can see, it's the same shape. So it should get easier every time you do it. And now let's add a couple here. I'm going to make these, whoops, I'm sorry, I'm outside the, let's zoom back out a little bit. We'll create some additional ones here. In these, kind of in where these natural spaces occur as we extend these FUGU shapes outward. We see that we can kind of place them in those open areas pretty conveniently. And we'll continue going around here. All right, so we've got that basic explosion of the FUGU shape. And now I'm going to draw a few that are, I'm going to continue outward, of course, to make this expand into our whole tile, but I want to also draw a few behind so that it looks like we can have some depth to our drawing. But I'm going to add another one up here first. Let's do one over here. Just whatever seems to make sense to you in your drawing. Okay, I'm just looking here where I might want to put some. Now I'm going to put a couple that disappear behind other ones. I will put one more right here, however. I keep changing my mind. Okay. Now let's put one here. So I'm going to create my pattern like this. Drawing behind. And I'll do one over on this side. I'll zoom in a little bit for you here so you can see a little better what I'm doing. So I know I'm drawing the same shape, right? But I'm drawing it in such a way as that it gets placed behind an existing shape. And this will help create a little bit of depth to our drawing, things that are over and under each other. Just kind of scatter a few of those around. here. And that looks okay for what we're shooting for. So now let's add some variety to these individual shapes. So these 4 center ones, we're going to do the same way. And what we'll do is we'll pick one of these sides. It doesn't matter which side you pick. And we'll create a little oval shape like that. And then we'll ink all the way around it to fill in that space. By adding an area of inked in like this, it creates a little bit of contrast and drama, as they call it in Zentangle, for our drawing, so that everything isn't just a bunch of lines. You get a little bit of color and contrast. And so now let's go around each of these, and I'm just going to create that same appearance on all 4 of these center ones. Each one in its turn. All right, now that we have that, we're going to draw slightly curved lines parallel to one another in this top part, or the opposite. I guess it doesn't have to be the top, just in your own mind, I guess. Just like that, and we'll do the same with all 4 of these. It's just a slightly curved line that helps give the impression of a shape to this little FUGU, and it's not just a flat piece again. And it will come to life even more once we add some shading with our graphite in the final step. Alright, so now let's take a look at some of these other ones and what we're going to do with them. Now on these 4, at least on my drawing, yours may be a little different, and that's completely fine. Since they look more like bowls, I'm going to accentuate that shape by creating orid lines or parallel lines on one side of this shape. Just like that. And when I get to the innermost one, I'll leave a little spot and I'm going to ink that in, just like this. And we'll do that with all 4 of these shapes, or these FUGU shapes. What I'm doing is just following that outer curve and creating some parallel lines. And then when I get to the inside there, I'm just going to ink that piece. So again, following this line, just repeating a parallel line. Pattern drawing is really simple when you break it down one line at a time like this, and it can be it's easily approachable if you have no skill or you're brand new to drawing, or it's helpful and meditative if you're an old pro. You just kind of keep going and make sense of it. So here, this one's drawn a little differently, but it still can work. So we're just going to create our lines. Just like that. So we've already got 2 varieties. So let's continue on. Let's pick some random ones here on the drawing. And let's create a little bit different design on these. So these I'm going to do some what's known as rounding, where I pick a line and I round it out or sculpt it or shape it by adding some ink to it. So just pick an area in that inner circle and just create like that. Again, adds a little drama, a little visual contrast, but it also differentiates it from these other ones. And you can do it to any. I'm going to sort of follow a pattern on my tile here, maybe as far as the symmetry of it, but you can do it to any of the FUGU shapes that you've created. And it's very simple. Again, I'll zoom in. It's very simple. I'm taking this line and I'm just creating some extra weight to that line, adding some thickness to it. Okay? And I'm just doing that same thing to several of these. Now there's another way that we can shade these. So I'm going to pick a couple others, and I'll try to pick ones that are easily viewed. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create little flick marks and then shade in or ink in to the corner. Some little flick marks. And this creates almost like a glimmer or a reflection shine right there on that shape. And I'm going to do that with a handful of these. And your tile may look completely different than mine in terms of the specific size and shapes and placements of the original FUGU shapes, and that's completely fine. You're doing your own drawing, and I'm just guiding you through that, helping you have some fun with the creative process. Doesn't have to look like, just like non-representational drawings aren't meant to be something, you don't even have to make your drawing be like my drawing. It can be your drawing and just have some fun with it. So if you're finding you drew more or less shapes, that's okay. Just create with what you've got and enjoy the process. One thing I do like about Zentangle, because I draw lots of other art as well, I like drawing creatures and science fiction characters and so on, but Zentangle is just a no pressure type of drawing for me. It just lets me sit down and put my pen to paper, as I've said many times, and just create for the sheer fun of creating. Sometimes I'm really surprised by what shows up on the paper as I go. Other times I've got an idea in my head and I'm trying to execute it in a certain way, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it almost always surprises me how the details come out. Now there's one other way that we can draw these tangles, these patterns. It's a similar one to this, but what we can do is create a weight on the end of the line rather than on the curve of it. And so it just gives it a slightly different look again. And that helps us to have a little more variety in the drawing. Those look completely different in my book. So that's all right. I'm going to do one more of these here. This shading type. And then this one I'll do like this. We just want to make sure that each one has one of these patterns applied to it, at least, so that we don't have any. Well, you could have some plain ones, I guess, now that I think of it, but I want to try to have some completed form of variance on each of these. Almost got them all here. So now I want to add one last thing with our ink pen before we go to the graphite. I did a similar thing on one of my previous videos where we create little lines that help give the sense of motion outward from the center. So I'm not hard inking these in. I'm kind of using a dashed or light touch line, and I'm just going in all four of these quadrants from the center, and then I'll create one that goes toward the corner here from each corner, or near that corner. I didn't hit it perfectly there, but that's okay. We're just creating these sort of loose lines that go outward. Now, once we've gotten all of those into place, we're going to split that again with some lines to create that, and I'm going to add some additional little hash marks here just to create a sense of movement outward, and this will become more apparent once we do the shading. Just very lightly with your pen, create some marks that give an impression of movement. It's completing the same process in all these areas that we created. Almost finished with that. This just allows us to add little additional pen details. So now that we've got that, let's get our graphite. So you're going to take your pencil, whether it's a mechanical pencil like I'm using, or whether you have just a standard 2B or 2 HB pencil is usually the recommended, just for its darkness sake. And what we're going to do is we're going to add some shading to each of these individual patterns, and then we'll add some shading to the background. So on these patterns, what I like to do is create a little bit of a shadow along these edges. And then once we blend it, it's going to make this shape look more rounded, like it has some shape, like a dimension. Sometimes it reminds me of a bumblebee's belly or something like that. Kind of a silly thing perhaps, but it makes me think of that with a rounded, or some insect's belly. I'm just adding a very thin line of graphite here that I can smooth out. So then I'll take my tortillon, my paper stump, I'll just blend this around the edges, leaving that inside to be untouched so that it's kind of white looking, or creates a highlight just by default on this shape. And so that already you can see, hopefully, I'll take a moment here and move the tile once we're done moving this graphite around. It just creates a sense of roundness or volume to that shape, and that's all we're looking for here. Now on these that are looking like a bowl, I'm going to try to accentuate that shape by creating a little bit of a shadow along this, what looks to me like the inner part of that bowl. And so we'll add graphite where these lines look like they go underneath that line. We're just adding some graphite there. Just a little bit of pencil graphite to allow us to blend that outward and create a more of a convincing shadow effect or dimensional effect. All right, once we have all those, let's do the same thing with our tortillon. We're going to blend that inward like this toward the center, and again that creates a shadow with a built-in highlight, so to speak. So where we don't disperse the graphite, it stays white and creates an automatic highlight to our shadow. These, since there's a highlight there that we left, I'm just going to put a little graphite in the corner or on the ends of that oval or football shape. And that's what I'll do with all those similar ones. All the ones that we inked that same way, I'm going to shade the same way. Just not that that's required. You can shade it any way you'd like, but it does create some sort of a consistency or in our patterns there, so the eye sees that throughout, and it just makes it a little more fun to look at, I think. So wherever we've done that same kind of inking, we're going to do this same kind of shading. I'm just putting a little bit of graphite in the corner. I think that's all of them that my eye can see, and then we'll just lightly blend that. Again, we'll leave the highlight, so to speak, in the center, so it kind of coincides with the inking that we did. Now I can't see this other corner, but I'm going to add a little bit of graphite there just to complete that appearance. Same here. All right, I think we got all of those. So now, what about these? These I'm going to create an orb-like look by creating a curve in this open part. And we'll do the similar, I'm going to do it on the same side as I look at that shape throughout. Now that's not required, you could alter back and forth. Now these are a little bit different, so we'll do something slightly different with those, but these where I've rounded both sides, that's the ones that I'm putting this curved shape of graphite in. And it looks like that is it. So let's go ahead, and what we do with that is very gently, you don't put much pressure, just trace over that in kind of a circular format, leaving the center to be white. And that will create a rounded, almost like an orb look to that shadow. Just helps with a slightly different appearance. As we blend that out, I think that's good. So now what about these? These I'm going to just create a little bit of a shadow along this center piece where we made the two ends heavier. I'm just going to create a little bit of a shadow in the center, and we'll just see what that looks like, how that accentuates the basic shape of that particular version of the FUGU. Oops, where'd the other one go? There it is. It's going to just make it look a little bit different than the other ones. It's not a dramatic difference, but it does end up showing a different sense to that shape. It makes the eye think something different. So now the last thing that we want to shade is we're going to create some, I don't want to say heavy, but some pretty dark graphite here in the center. Now it doesn't have to be a perfect pattern. I just want to create, starting in the center, I want to go outward with some graphite. And I want it to be heavy here in the center. And we can always add more if we need to, but you'll see how we disperse and spread this. It's going to help with the effect of that center being further away than the rest of it. Now once we've got some graphite laid down there, we're going to pull it out, and it will get lighter the further we get from the center. And when you've got a layer of graphite like that, you'll find that your tortillon, your paper stump, will retain it. It'll kind of build up on there, and so you'll be able to disperse it even more easily without having to add more and more. We just want to stay outside of our FUGU shapes, so we're sort of coloring in the background here with the graphite. And like I said, it should get lighter as we go outward, which should naturally happen as you spread the graphite, but you want to pay attention to how you're layering this as we go outward, or how you're pulling it so that you're not going, like if I started going over and over out here, then this would get darker than the inside, or than that center. So we want to just be careful of that. Lightly follow some of these lines that we've done when we did it with our ink pen that will help accentuate that sense of movement outward. We don't want it to become too dark, but we want to create something that the eye can see there. Alright, so let's take a look at that. I'm going to zoom out a little bit further just so you can see the appearance of that. And so that created our FUGU Explosion, as I call it. Just a bunch of FUGUs flying around and creating some movement to the eye and give us a chance to do a mono tangle today. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this process and found this a fun or interesting tangle to do. And I look forward to seeing everyone back again real soon in the Tangles and Tunes channel. Thank you. Bye-bye now.